Hey guys, Shrapnel here. I'm gonna first apologize for the absolutely horrendous video quality. I only have the webcam attached to my laptop here, and it is barely functioning. I had to shake my screen to get it to turn on. So bear with that. I'm not about to go buy one. I'm just gonna use this since I don't upload very often. Just bear with it. Hopefully this microphone is okay, we shall see. Anyways, so today's video is odd, mainly because I am extremely bored, so enjoy my boredom. And I've been binge watching YouTube pretty much all day since it's September 2nd of 2019, and it is Labor Day. So no work, paid day off, hooray. And I had nothing to do since the weather's been atrocious here. So YouTube it is, and I just finished, well, I'm about halfway through Nutnfancy's Greatest Zombie Killing Weapons of All Time, Volume 1. So I got bored, and I wrote up a little script in my handy-dandy 5-subject notebook that I have lying around from college, and I'm throwing the things now. So, basically, what I wrote out was a couple of different factors, and this can be expanded more so not just on the zombie apocalypse, but prepping, shit at the fan, what have you. Kind of like a bug out, off-grid kind of deal, but take it for what it is. It's just a mental exercise just to have fun. So let's get in it, shall we? So a few important points to note before we actually get into the weapons themselves, as well as some gear. I'm going to throw some gear in at the tail end. Is commonality of the item in question for parts if necessary, mainly firearms, but as well as some of the gear as well. But we'll focus on the firearms mainly because the gear will be fairly simple to replace, I believe. Long-term reliability, ease of access. So that's more to do with pre as in post. Post, ease of access is, can you find it? Can you access it? Prior is it legal? Are there restrictions? Is there a time process? Is it a process to get it? Like in New York and other, I think California, yeah, New York, California, and there's probably a few others where it's a lengthy process to get a pistol, or there's certain restrictions on certain attachments that you could put on the firearm, stuff like that. Practicality. What can it do? Is it good at taking game? Can it serve multiple functions? Size and weight. Is it bulky? Is it light? Is it easily packable? Ammunition. Although I'm also going to get into material. Use if injured. How easy is it for you to manipulate it with your weak hand, or if you're not at full strength? How stealthy is it? Is it loud and proud, or is it low profile? And ease of use in general. Is it idiot proof? Do you need training to use it even remotely competently? And realistically, with everything, you need at least to be relatively competent with it to be effective. So, let's get into it, shall we? We're going to start off with melee weapons, so handheld, swinging weapons. And I have broken everything down into basic types. We have the axe, the hatchet. I have them separated for a reason, which I'll get into shortly. The pry bar, the shovel, the machete, the bat, the hammer, and improvised. So, starting off with axes, we're talking about something along the lines of this. This is a boy's axe, but you could go with a longer, heavier one. Or So we'll start with that first. So commonality, hardware stores, sheds, gardens, wherever. Wherever you find some, wherever it could fit a use. Long-term reliability. The synthetic ones are definitely going to be better or the wood handle ones are going to be better long-term in terms instead of over the plastic ones, but there is the caveat of you need to know what the hell you're doing in order to make full use of them. Now, then we move to the hatchet. It's smaller, much lighter compared to the axe, so the hatchet is superior in terms of size and weight restrictions. It can't cut as well though, so it's a little less practical, we'll say. You could fell a larger tree with an axe over a hatchet. Use if injured for both is not ideal. They're rather cumbersome, they're slow swinging, heavy. So some people, their weak hand is really their weak hand. I am a righty. I can swing a hatchet, but that doesn't mean I can swing it safely or accurately. So there's that. Everything here in the melee section is like top notch for stealth. And ease of use, some are easier than others. So with the axe and the hatchet out of the way, they're okay. I'd say their weak point is the fact that if you're injured, good luck. The pry bar. So we're talking like a flat bar or a crowbar. There is a slight difference, but I'm just going to call it a pry bar for simplicity's sake. They're heavy and kind of bulky, so in terms of size and weight restrictions, good luck. Same goes for use if injured, good luck. Commonality, again, super common. Look at just hardware stores, repair shops. Pretty common. Long-term reliability. If you somehow manage to break one of those things, you are doing something really freaking stupid. So, long-term reliability is like probably going to be the highest of anything on this list. You know, there's only one other thing on this list that will probably be close to it. The shovel. Now, there's a couple different shovels out there. You got your flathead, you got your spades, you got your coal shovels, you got obviously not snow shovels. Plastic, are you retarded? So we're gonna look more at your typical ones that you would see in a garden. So you got your round nose spade, and then you got your flat nose. I forget what they're called exactly, but there's that. So in terms of those, I'd go for the round-headed spade, just because it could be sharpened into a spear. It's great at digging. I think they're the most well-rounded shovel. I don't own the round. I just have a spade. Next is the machete. Oh wait, I'm going too fast. So the shovel, in terms of ease of access, yeah, practicality is amazing. You can dig a hole. No, that's about it with a shovel, realistically. Use if injured. It depends. Because if, again, using weak hand, you're not going to be swinging it too well, but you can use it as a spear. So we'll give that like a mid score. Ease of use, that's probably one of the easiest. Okay, long-term reliability, I'd say is pretty high, because it's fairly simple to replace the head of a shovel, because you break the handle of a shovel, remove the broken end, and if it breaks if it breaks halfway down, you have a shorter shovel. But if it breaks towards the end, you just gotta find a way to remove the handle or reel it. This is if you're really off grid, but remove the handle, ram a stick, cut down a sapling, ram it through, tape it up or something. You're good. Moving on, the machete. So, commonality, probably about the same as the axe and the hatchet. Maybe a little less, only because you're not going to find very good ones. You're going to get like the Fiskars, the cheapy ones. You're not going to get like a good one, like an Ontario. So we'll say commonality with an asterisk. Long-term reliability, pretty decent. You just got to worry about the edge and chipping, if it's cheap, or if it's one of the cheap ones, bending. So practicality is going to be lower, only because depending on the area you live, they may not be adequate for cutting firewood. It's going to be mostly just a weapon, a defensive weapon. Size and weight, definitely pretty good. They're fairly lightweight. You can get a scabbard for it. You can attach it to your bag. You can keep it on your hip like a rapier or something. They're pretty simple to carry. Use if injured is pretty good because you're just swinging it. It's a long edge. You just gotta maybe spend like a couple hours practicing edge orientation with your weak hand. Buy a cheap one. Take some plastic bottles or some milk jugs, fill them with water, and practice edge alignment at different angles at different heights with different styles of swinging. Real easy, real fast, you'll be done in no time. The baseball bat, or for our British friends, the cricket bat. I'd say long-term reliability is pretty good, especially if you have like one of the cold steel polypropylene bats or an aluminum bat. Wood is okay, I'll say, but the aluminum is definitely what you want. Mind you, they may bend over time, but they still swing. They just may be a little more awkward at that point. Size and weight of a baseball bat, they're cumbersome, kind of hard to holster, but I think your best bet if you're going to carry a baseball bat is actually use a archery quiver attached to your backpack kind of low. That way you can draw it. It's not going to take forever to draw. Also, one of those shotgun scabbards would work, I would assume. So the weight, you could get a lightweight aluminum bat or you could get a heavy wooden one. So that is at your discretion. So the weight is a little hazy. Use if injured. I don't know. I honestly don't know about that one, because it's two-handed, but you could swing it one-handed, you just won't get enough power. I'd say for use if injured, wooden would be superior at that point, because the aluminum ones, you need both hands to get the speed necessary. So again, kind of falls under the size and weight. Stealth, the wood is definitely better than the aluminum. You don't get that loud dink. And ease of use. If you live in America, you've probably swung a baseball bat at least once in your life, even if it's just a wiffle ball bat. So ease of use is there. The hammer. I'm not talking a sledgehammer. Those are stupid. Those are ridiculously heavy, which goes back to the axe. I'll go back. The axe, as well as the pickaxe. The pickaxe is dumb. It's way too cumbersome to be useful. The axe, you probably want to go with a lighter boy's axe style, or one of the smaller ones at the hardware store. You don't want to use like a heavy splitting maul or a heavy sledgehammer. I'm talking the smaller like carpentry hammers. For that, you'd want to definitely go with the largest carpentry hammer you can find. Preferably one made of all metal, like an Estwing. And with that, long-term durability, great. Practicality, great. Ease of access, amazing. You could get a cheap hammer at Walmart or wherever. Typically, everyone already has one. If you don't have one, you're doing something wrong. I don't know how you found this video. Use if injured, pretty good. Again, you just maybe want to work on alignment, maybe. And for that, it's just tap some nails. Get a board, set out some nails, try and tap them with your weak hand, and see how that goes. Stealth, again, amazing. Ease of use, amazing. I'll say the one thing, the hammer's only weakness falls in line with a hatchet. Range. You got to get close. And now we get to improvised. Now, improvised is where it gets a little funky. What qualifies as improvised weapon? Basically, anything that has mass that is swingable. So that one, for that, your improvised weapon, you got to put some thought into it. If you're in a room and you're trying to grab something, try to, obviously if you're in that situation, grab the first thing that ain't bolted down, but if you have a couple minutes before you have to leave, take some time, look at your surroundings, see what you can grab. Some improvised weapons I like are table legs, metal ones, if you can get them off. I'd say a short-term one would definitely be like one of the aluminum crutches. Those things, I remember for giggles when I was younger, back when I was really into the whole zombie fad, I did some testing with I even used a crutch and to see what it would do, and it was actually surprisingly effective. And my testing process involved me hitting a pumpkin to see what kind of wound it would create, and it did okay. It definitely would take a couple of swings. It'd be more of a knockout than a kill. And in terms of durability, it took, I think, 5 swings against a pine tree before it broke. And by breaking, I mean the bolts came loose and it became too rickety to swing without pinching your hands. So improvised weapons, go with something that looks durable and is fairly easy to carry. So you could go a decent amount of time with it. Okay, let's get out of melee finally. So moving on to the first ranged weapon. Now I'm a huge fan of this category. I've owned quite a few. Right now I only own one because I've owned some cheap ones. I've experimented with a few, gotten rid of them. But that is the shotgun. I love shotguns. So there's the base types of single shots, double barrels, both over, under, and side by side, pump actions, and semi-automatics. And then you have your 3 main calibers. I know there's 3 main round types. There's a few others, but the 3 main ones are 410, 12 gauge, and 20 gauge. There's also 16 gauge and 28 gauge available where I am, but that's about it. So, so we'll start with the pump action. We'll get to caliber after that. So pump action, commonality for gun parts depends on the one you pick. You got the 870 and the Remington 870 and the Mossberg 500. Both are great choices. I lean more towards the Remington. I have used my sister's Remington 870 Express 20 gauge quite a lot, and it's very enjoyable with a 21-inch barrel and wood furniture. So long-term reliability for the pump action is pretty good, especially if you get a high-quality one. If you get one of the cheap Chinese ones like the ATI, like my buddy has, it's just a boiling piece of garbage. So if you get a good high-quality one like that, you're pretty good in terms of long-term reliability. Ithaca, I'd say, is again good for the long-term. Also Weatherby is good for the long-term reliability, but not so good for commonality of parts because they're a little bit harder to find. Ease of access, you should already have one. Practicality, you could do a lot with a shotgun. You can get birdshot and take down birds. You can get buckshot and defend yourself at mid-range, and you can get slugs, and you can drop a lot of things. Ammunition, I'll get to that after. Use if injured, I think, again, I'll have to get to that later, but we can say so far the pump is a two-handed weapon, but there is a technique, but you have to be kneeling or sitting to use it, and it's where you brace the gun against something, cock it with I'll use my right hand since I'm right-handed, but lefties can do it too. You cock it with the butt on the ground or on whatever surface you're sitting or kneeling near, and then you bring it up, but you need a rest, like a car bumper, a concrete barrier, something to rest the barrel on so you can aim. So Yusuf injured, horrible. Stealth, I think the shotguns probably do the worst in the stealth category. So I'm going to just skip stealth for the rest of this section. And then ease of use, depends on ammo choice. So the single and the double barrel, again, fall in the, most of it's the same. I'd say in terms of, oh, and I missed size and weight. It'll probably be the same for the most part for all of them. I'd say, though, it comes down to your setup. A pump action with plastic furniture is definitely going to be about the same weight as a wood furnitured single barrel, single shot. So, the single shot, again, I'd say the commonality is where it has a weak point, but long-term reliability is probably, especially with a high-quality one, honestly, I'd say a little higher than in the long-term reliability because there's less moving parts, and and also jamming. The double barrel, I'd say, beats the single shot in terms of practicality, but it loses points in terms of long-term reliability because there's more parts and it's hard. Honestly, double barrels are kind of falling out of favor, and the side-by-sides are kind of out of favor, and the over-unders can be kind of complex to work on. I've owned an over-under. I did some deep cleaning on it, and it was a nightmare to get it back together. Mind you, the one I had was probably more complex than they normally are. It was a by call. It was a Russian over-under. Onto the semi-automatic. I'd say for the semi-automatic, it's right in line with the pump action, maybe a little worse in the long-term reliability because there's even more moving parts. Now on to the chamberings. I'm just going to cover the main three because the other two are rare, and that is, we'll start with the 410 bore, which I think is like a 67 or 68 gauge, but in terms of ammo, in terms of size and weight, it's really light. So in terms of size and weight, it's the winner. Practicality, kind of loser, because it's the weakest, it's the smallest. You get the fewest amount of shot with bird shot, so you have less of a hit probability. The slugs are nowhere near as powerful. And then in terms of commonality, there's 3 Walmarts in my area. The one I frequent only carries 3 selections, and you got bird shot, and then you get, I think, like 5 different boxes of bird shot. So you got 3-inch, you got 2.5, and you only get 8 and 6.5. And then you get one option for slugs, and it's the Remington Sluggers, and they're the 2.5-inch, and it's a 15-pack. So not a good selection there. There's another one that's a little closer, but I don't like it. That one has a much better selection at better prices, and then the other one I frequent doesn't even carry it. So that's where 410 falls. 20 gauge. Now that one's a little more interesting. The one that carries the Walmart I'm going to use the same scenario. So the Walmart that I frequent carries 20 gauge. You can get boxes of 100 bird shot, and they have like 3 options for slugs and 1 option for buckshot. The one that doesn't carry the 410 has the best selection of 20 gauge, and then the one that has the best selection of 410 doesn't carry it at all. And then 12 gauge. all of them have the same selection, and it's quite good. So, and then 20 gauge and 12 gauge, I'd say their size and weight restrictions are about the same, with 20 gauge slightly edging it out over time. The more and more ammo you get, the more and more it's noticeable, just due to the size of the boxes. So, that about does it for shotguns. Let's move on to handguns. Now, I have this broken down kind of odd, just for explanation purposes. So we'll start with the semi-automatic pistol, and we're going to go with anything that isn't a 1911 or a Glock. Those I consider their own animals. So your standard semi-automatic pistol, your run-of-the-mill Sig Sauer, I can't think of any other brands, H&Ks, stuff like that. I'd say those, long-term reliability, all of these probably are mid-range. Commonality, kind of same, because they're not as common. Ease of access, depends on where you live mostly. Size and weight, every handgun's going to be pretty good, but depending on your caliber, it could get heavy. Depending on the frame, it could get pretty heavy. Some can be pretty small, but not very powerful, and kind of awkward to use. Ammo, 9mm, very common. 380, not so common in my area. 40 and 45, pretty good, especially if you're up north and you have to deal with maybe larger predatory animals. Use if injured, 9mm, 380, pretty good. 40, 45, not so good. Stealth, I'd say it's okay, especially if your area allows suppressors. Then yeah, it's really good. Otherwise, we'll say medium. If you fire off one shot, you might be okay. You're going to alert your opponent. If there's more than one, you're going to alert them to your presence, but they may not be able to discern your location, giving you a time to evade and escape. Moving on, we're going to break down the 1911. Where that loses out in terms of it kind of loses out in commonality of parts, because there's a couple different variants, so it might be hard to find. Say you need a new barrel, you might have a little difficulty finding a new barrel for yourself. Long-term reliability, those are pretty solid pistols. They're pretty bare bones. That also involves the Browning high power, not just the 1911. If you go with the high power 9mm, I'd say that's better than the Colt 1911 and 45. Size and weight, it's a very heavy pistol because it's a steel frame. Ammunition, magazines may be a little iffy, but if you go to any place that sells firearm accessories, like gun stores, places like that, you might be able to find magazines. Use if injured, I'd say the 1911 is not the best because of its weight. Your weak hand may not be able to support it to get a good sight picture for long periods. And then stealth, 45 is a loud round. And then ease of use, I'd say the 1911, not really. The Glock, definitely a little bit easier to use. The ergonomics I don't like, but that's personal preference. Commonality of parts is definitely probably the best out of all handguns available. Long-term reliability, again, pretty good. They're pretty tough little pistols. Ease of access, again, jurisdiction, but it's a very common pistol to see, and the prices are reasonable, unlike the 1911s, which can get ridiculous. Practicality, you could have multiple different Glocks to fill different roles. You can have the Glock 10, you can have the Glock, I think it was the Glock 26, which is a double stacked 9mm small frame. That's great for concealed carry, but then you can get the Glock 19, which is a big one, if I remember correctly. I'm not too familiar with the Glocks, I'll be completely honest. So that's a small, so you can have multiple different platforms, so it can cover a lot of bases. You can get add-on sights. They're very modular. Iraq veteran 8888 said They said in one of their videos it's like the Honda Civic of firearms, or of the pistol realm. So, use if injured, I'd say is probably a little better than the 1911 because they're fairly light, especially if you go with the 9mm options. Ammunition, depends on the round you pick. Ease of use, they're stupid simple. And then we move on to the small bore revolver. For that, I consider a small bore revolver 38 special and below. So your 22s, your 38s, not your 357s, 38 special only. Those, I'd say, are pretty good in most of the aspects. Size and weight, especially if you go with a smaller one, with say like a 4-inch barrel with just a standard, comfortable but not obnoxious grip. It's pretty good. Stealth, those are probably some of the better ones because they can be fairly quiet with the ammunition choice. Ease of use, they do take some getting used to, especially if you go with a single action version. Use if injured, I'd say though they don't do too well in terms of that, only because a lot of them, how they load is a two-handed affair. It's very difficult to load a pistol, revolver with one hand. Practicality, I don't know about that. Small game, hardly adequate for defensive purposes unless you do the 38 where it's average. Commonality for parts, revolvers are kind of out of style, so good luck. Long-term reliability, if you keep it clean and oiled and don't beat the heck out of it, they'll last you a good long while, especially if with a high quality one. Big bore revolvers, so that's like your 45 Colts, your 44 Special, and your 44 Magnums, your 357s, your Smith & Wesson 500s, stuff like that. For those, I'd say they're along the same lines as the small bore in terms of reliability, commonality, ease of access, and ease of use. Stealth, they definitely lose a little because they're louder. Use if injured, the recoil on them is much worse, so good luck. Ammunition, depends on your ammo choice. If you go with a 357 or a 44, you'd be a little better off than if you went with the Smith & Wesson M500. If you do that, God help your wrists. Practicality, they definitely win a little bit more, especially if you go with like a 44 Magnum and you put a rail on it so that way it could take a scope. Yeah, so that does it for handguns, I believe. If there's open for more room for discussion in the comments, just FYI. So moving on to the rifle. So I broke it down into again, kind of like how I did the handguns. So we'll start with the base types of the 22 and the 17 HMR. So commonality of parts, if you go for like a Ruger 1022 or a Marlin, I think it was the Model 60, you're pretty okay for parts. If you go for like one of the oddball ones, like a Cricket, good luck. Long-term reliability, again, depends on the model you choose. The Ruger 1022, the older ones definitely seem to be better than the newer ones. It's just from personal experience. I owned a brand new one and I used an older one, and the older one ran fine. The one I owned had already gone through its break-in period and it still ran like crap. I used all sorts of different ammunition that was available in my area, and it just didn't work. 17 HMR, I'd say flat out ignore, unless that's all you have, in which case, just get some ammo and maybe save up and get something else. Ease of access, 22s are pretty common, pretty easy to get. Practicality, they're pretty practical. You're not going to take a deer with it unless you're aiming for the head, and even then, you got to be within a fairly short distance, I believe. Let's see, size and weight, they're pretty good, especially if you go with one with all synthetic, like a Ruger, or go with the Ruger 1022 Takedown. That's a good one. Ammunition, stupidly common, really easy to carry. Doesn't like water, I found though. Use if injured, stupid easy. There's hardly any recoil. Stealth, pretty easy. You could go with some subsonics. And ease of use, they're usually pretty self-explanatory. Some may be a little more complex. Lever actions. So we're moving on to lever action rifles. Those ones, in terms of commonality for parts, I'd say is fairly average, especially if you go with like a Marlin Model 336, then you're sitting pretty good. But if you go with like a Henry Long Ranger or a Browning, I think it was the BLR, I want to call it. Those are going to be pretty hard to find parts for, so that's why I'm going to average it out as to like a mid-tier. It depends on what you have. And it also depends on your caliber choice. Some are more common than others. Long-term reliability, a well taken care of, high-quality one will last you a good long while. Ease of access. Rifles are going to be definitely some of the easier ones to access, especially lever actions, and another one we'll get to shortly. Size and weight, they're definitely going to be one of the heavier ones because most of the time they have wood furniture, heavy steel, longer barrels. Ammunition choices, they're mostly it's like 30-30, 45-70, which aren't super common. The only place I can get 45-70 in my area is the local Dick's, which is a half-hour drive from where I live. Actually closer to 45 minutes. 30-30, I can get all three of my local Walmarts. Use if injured, I'd say it's doable. You definitely still need a rest, but you could definitely work the action with your weak hand with a rest. Stealth, due to the range that rifles can achieve, I'd say stealth is okay, as long as you limit the number of shots. And ease of use, again, pretty self-explanatory, especially if you have one with a load gate, or even the tubular ones are pretty simple, but ease of use is there. So moving on to the next one that's also very common that still allows for a decent rate of fire is the bolt action rifle, like a Remington 700. If you have a Remington 700 and like a 308, you're good in terms of commonality and long-term reliability. The Remington 700 is an amazing rifle. Ease of access, again, really good. Practicality, pretty good. You can take a lot of game, and the range that you can achieve with a good zeroed scope. Size and weight, they're long, they're bulky, but if you go with one with synthetic furniture, they're not that heavy. Ammunition, depends on what you choose. If you choose 308, you're sitting pretty good. If you go with like some oddball caliber, you might not be so good. Use if injured, I'd say that's their weak point, only because when I shoot a rifle, I have to shoot it left-handed, and if you shoot right-handed and you have to shoot left, running that bolt's going to be awkward. Or if you're trying to shoot right-handed, but you need to brace it or whatever. I don't know. I'm tired. Moving on. Single shot rifles. I'd say, like the single shot shotgun, pretty good in all categories, but they definitely win out. They lose maybe a little bit in terms of practicality, depending on your caliber. And then semi-automatic rifles. So anything that is not an AR or an AK. So like the Ruger Mini 14, an M1 Garand, stuff like that. I'd say commonality for parts is pretty low, especially if you go with like an oddball one. Ease of access, pretty good, especially if you go with the Ruger Mini 14 where it doesn't have all the scary stuff on it. Size and weight, those can get kind of heavy. ammunition, depends on the caliber. Use if injured, I'd say semi-automatics are probably some of the best, but the M1 Garand might be a little weak in that category just due to how it operates. Stealth is fine. Ease of use, some of them are kind of finicky and a little tricky to get running. So moving on to the AR and the AK platforms. You should know how those behave. It really comes down to, for commonality, how did you set it up? Long term, how much money did you spend on it? Ease of access. Depending on your jurisdiction and where you live, maybe a little difficult, maybe a little easy, who knows. Practicality, depends on the caliber. If you go with like 223, I'd say the practicality is a little weaker compared to if you do like an AR-10 build or you use 7.62. Size and weight, again, depends on how you built it. If you went with like a long barrel for long range accuracy, you're definitely going to lose out in points. But if you go with like a compact, like close quarters build, it might be a little better. Ammo. Use if injured, I'd say those are actually pretty good because they're magazine fed. They're just all around, they're designed to be pretty much idiot proof. Stealth, we already went over that. Ease of use, designed to be pretty much idiot proof. So if you're a complete noob, you may need a quick walkthrough, but a quick walkthrough will pretty much set you up to where you'll at least be somewhat useful. Okay, so that pretty much does it for weapons in that aspect. So now some important gear you're definitely going to want in your kit, especially if you're out on patrol or if you're scavenging, is you're going to want a multi-tool, like this Victorinox Swiss Tool Spirit, sorry about the glare, a Leatherman Wave, Leatherman Cert, anything from Leatherman. The cheap ones, I'd say stay away from. This is one that I got at Walmart. It's the Multi-Force from Ozark Trail. Still in testing, but so far pretty good. But a medium to high quality multi-tool is helpful. A sharpener for your, always have a pocket knife on you and to sharpen the blade on your multi-tool. And if you go with a bladed weapon, make sure it can accommodate that or carry a separate one for it. Whatever you decide, go for it. A cleaning kit for your firearm. It should be able to, if you carry multiple, you should be able to clean both in the field. So a little bit of oil or some barricade wipes, a bore snake, and if necessary, the tools to take it apart. Tape, rope, and zip ties. You may need to make repairs or hold something in place. Like if you're going through a chain link fence, pull it back, use some zip ties to zip tie it in place, and then when you leave, you can just snip the zip ties. Or use rope, tie it off, and just make sure you get the rope when you leave. Portable shelter. I'd say at the very least have some rain gear, even if it's like really lightweight. Like I have a packing windbreaker that is water resistant for, I think it's like 20 minutes, and one of those like space blankets. And if you have the room, I definitely suggest a wool blanket as well. At least 3 ways to make fire. I choose to use a Bic lighter, a large fire steel, and then I use one of those like survival strikers. And then food and water, not just stuffed on you, but ways to procure it. So one of those water spigot tools, I forget what they're called. A Silcock key, that's what they're called. Water bags, empty water bottles that are crunched up. In terms of food procurement, like dry bags. Light, so flashlights, at least 3. One attached, at least one has to be attached to at least one of your firearms, whether it be your long gun or a handgun or whatever you have. One pocket style light, and then a headlamp. If you want to add one more, I'd definitely say a larger light that could be swung as a weapon, like a mag light. And then any accessories for your firearm. So if you're running an AR and you want to have it be good for both long range and close quarters, carry a red dot as well as a scope, extra magazines, stuff like that. Yeah, and that's about all the important gear I could think of off the top of my head. And then, oh, one more thing, some tools. I'd say a 4-inch adjustable wrench and an 8-inch adjustable wrench. So this style, where you can open them up, dedicated pliers, and wire cutters. And if you're doing some urban, maybe some bolt cutters, and it wouldn't hurt to have like one of these mini tack hammers. This one happens to be a vintage one that I picked up. It has a built-in flathead driver. So that's my choice. And a first aid kit. Okay, and then I left this section for last. It's specialty weapons, mainly because there's just so much like uniqueness to them in terms of either training or rarity that they're largely useless for most people. The first is the bow. You have to be really good with a bow and know what the hell you're doing in order to use one effectively. If you don't know how to use a bow, ignore it. I'd say the same goes for a crossbow, but it's a little bit more lenient, but it does take, you definitely need to have the physical strength in order to cock it. And the size and weight constraints for those is pretty bad. They're bulky, the ammunition is bulky, the weight on them is kind of like meh, but just the size is atrocious. The sword. Good luck finding a high quality one that will hold an edge and won't bend if you hit something a little too hard, like bone. You need training to know how to use it. You can't just swing them willy-nilly. So ignore those. Power tools. They lose a lot in stealth and practicality and long-term reliability. Once you run out of power, they're useless. And that includes the mighty chainsaw. And I don't know why I put this one on here, but I felt like it. And that is the climbing axe. You know, the ones you see like Lara Croft using in the Tomb Raider games, and you see on like the back of hikers' backpacks on when they climb Mount Everest. If you have one of those, do let me know in the comments section if you think it would be an adequate weapon. Honestly, I don't think so, just because of like the pickaxe where you have to be really precise with it. I don't know how durable they are or nothing. I assume they're pretty durable because they need to, be able to save your life. But other than that, I don't know. So all in all, that's my thoughts. And now my choices, what I would pick in terms of weapons and gear. So for my melee weapon, I would choose the Cold Steel Spetsnaz shovel, because it can be used as a it can be used as a hatchet, a machete, and a shovel. Very well rounded, and it's fairly small. You can get the sheath for it. It's not a quick access tool, but if it's out and you can swing it, go for it. It fits all the criteria pretty well. I'd say its only weakness is really long-term reliability, just because it has to stay sharp, but even when it's dull, it'll still do some damage. In terms of the long gun, I would pick a Henry single-shot 12 gauge with some of the short lane gun adapters. I have my shell bag next to me. I don't have the Henry yet. I'm picking it up in 2 weeks, because right now I only have my H&R 410 because I had one of the Hatfield SGLs, but it failed miserably. I was getting gas blow by in my face, so I don't want that. So I decommission it and it's turning into a wall hanger. In terms of the handgun, I'm going with what I have right now. I don't feel like getting it out because I don't want to risk my camera shutting off because it's still kind of flickering at me. I would use my Heritage Rough Rider, and that can use both 22 long rifle and 22 Magnum. And then for gear, my multi-tool, I would definitely have two, actually. I have my Victorinox Swiss Tool Spirit as well as the one that I'm testing right now. I'd take both. They're heavy, yes, but if one fails, I want another because I love them. My sharpener, I would take my Lansky Puck as well as my Work Sharp ceramic rod thing. My cleaning kit would be some of the barricade wipes. I'd just carry like 5 or 6 in my bag and then have more at camp. And my 2 bore snakes. For the tape, I'd choose a compressed roll of duct tape as well as a roll of electrical tape. For my rope, I would carry jute twine and 550 cord, and then zip ties, I'd carry 12-inch black ones. Shelter is going for me. I don't own a wool blanket at the moment. I ordered one. I'm just waiting for it to arrive. So waiting on the wool blanket. I already said I had the windbreaker, and I carry both a Mylar sleeping bag, one of the spaceman ones, and then I also have a Mylar blanket. So I have options, because the Mylar ones, I'm not going to bother trying to fold them back up. They're disposable. As well as one of those emergency rain ponchos in bright yellow, because that's just what I have. Fire, I went through that. Food and water procurement. Like I said, plastic bottles and dry bag. Light, my Olight S2 baton is my main go-to. It doubles as a headlamp. I'm saving up money to get a nice headlamp, but I need to get a new shotgun first. As well as, the reason why I carry 2 small flashlights is this one can be zip tied to my gun or taped, or however which way you want to attach it. I'd probably zip tie it. But this runs off a AA. This is CR123, so I want one that uses common batteries, but I still prefer this one. As well as a few other things. And then gun accessories is I would use my short lane adapters. Well, one's a short lane, the other is not. I choose a gun adapters 3-inch rifled 22LR and a Chazelle from eBay 9mm 5-inch rifled. So my 12 gauge can become a quote-unquote carbine, even though it's got a 28-inch barrel and not super practical in terms of that, but it's something. It'll keep me in the fight longer. So, my timer on the bottom is saying 53 minutes. Hopefully I didn't talk for nothing with no microphone, because I don't even know if this works. I didn't bother testing it, but we shall see. All in all, I hope you enjoyed this random rant, or rambling, or whatever you want to call it, of me just spouting off nonsense. And maybe it helped you a little bit, maybe not. Maybe it was just background noise to entertain yourself with, what have you. All I can say is, thank you for watching, have a wonderful evening, and God bless America.